The control point is being contested.
That was competitive Demoman. I think it's important to note that Demoman is probably one of the hardest classes in TF2 to play effectively, and when you bring him into a competitive setting, that goes to a whole new level. Additionally, being a projectile-only class makes him inherently harder to play than other more hit-scan-based classes. Ammo and health management is significantly more important on Demo too, since your weapons deal damage not only to your enemies but often yourself as well. He is especially susceptible to more close-ranged classes such as Scout or Spy, meaning you have to know how to position yourself effectively in those situations in order to level the playing field. Managing all of this makes Demo seem very daunting to players who haven't played him very much, and the added responsibility of having to manage your whole team on top of that just adds to the stress. Lucky for you though, I'm here to tell you everything you need to know. This video will be divided into a few key sections in which I covered the basics of Demoman gameplay, as well as the two main competitive formats in which Demoman is played, that being 6v6 and 9v9, more commonly known as Sixes and Highlander respectively. I'll later cover Maincalling, as well as some additional strategies and a rundown of the most popular and effective loadouts used in both Sixes and Highlander. Demoman is a projectile-only, explosive-wielding powerhouse.
Oh my god, bro.
By default, he has 175 base health, which can go up to 260 with overheal from almost every medigun, and he moves at a respectable 280 hammer units per second, which is just slightly slower than snipers, pyros, and engineers, which makes him the third slowest class in the game behind heavy and soldier. Demo has 3 weapons in his arsenal: a grenade launcher, a sticky bomb launcher, and a bottle. I won't be going over Demo Knight in this video, since I think I will leave that up to a certain other individual who is more qualified to talk about that, but I will be covering the other side grades later on in the video. Your primary weapon is the grenade launcher, which holds up to 4 pipes in the clip that travel in an arc, dealing a clean 100 damage on a direct hit with an enemy, and a roller that does on average about 40 damage. Pipes become rollers when they collide with the map geometry like walls, floors, or doors, and then they just kind of roll. Until they explode. This can be especially helpful when spamming from long distances, because it doesn't matter whether you shoot the pipe at point blank or from another continent, since as long as it directly hits your target, it will always deal 100 damage. Moving on, your secondary weapon is the sticky bomb launcher, and despite it technically being in the secondary slot, most demos, including myself, believe that it is effectively Demoman's primary weapon, along with being overall the best weapon in the entire game. With 8 shots in the clip, the sticky bomb launcher roughly deals an average 115 damage with each shot to every target in its explosion radius at close range, and around 40 at long range, affected by splash damage, fall off, and ramp up. This immense firepower allows it to deal insane amounts of damage in a very short amount of time, and things get even crazier with the existence of sticky traps. When you fire your sticky bomb launcher, it fires sticky bombs, which, as the name implies, stick to the surfaces you shoot them at, but do note that you can only have 8 of them out at a time. By pressing secondary fire, you detonate every armed sticky bomb currently out, which can one-shot every class in the game with overheal. A lesser known feature of the sticky bomb launcher is it can hold down primary fire to charge your sticky bombs, which can make this little charge bar fill up. Depending on how much you charge your sticky bombs, their fire range and their damage increases. This allows you to snipe finishing kills on enemies running away from you, or annoy the living hell out of engineers at long range, since when shooting buildings, explosives don't actually account for damage falloff, but they do account for damage ramp up. That effectively means that you can do upwards of 130 damage with one well-placed sticky at any range to an enemy engineer's nest. Place 2 or more stickies, and that nest might as well be gone. Another way to use the sticky bomb launcher is by far the most oppressive, and the most hated, and that's sticky spam. By pressing primary fire, you shoot 1 sticky at the enemy, but don't detonate it yet. Next, shoot your second sticky, and after you do so, press secondary fire to detonate your first sticky. Simple in theory, and even simpler in practice. This ensures that you have at least one sticky always out and ready to detonate in the event that anyone walks into the blast radius after you've already shot the first one. Unsuspecting enemies might not see you shoot the first shot, allowing you to start the vicious cycle of spam. If you were to detonate the first sticky instantly, you would alert the enemy of your presence and position, giving them time to react more quickly to you, which could result in you dying before you can get any significant damage in. You can, however, just immediately detonate the first sticky if you need damage immediately, so it really just depends on the situation. Another important technique for Demoman to master is the art of sticky jumping. Since you are the third slowest class in the game, you need a fast and effective way to traverse huge distances to get to the front line as soon as possible. To perform a sticky jump, place a sticky on the ground or on a wall in front of you and wait for it to blink. This means your sticky is armed and ready to detonate. Next, walk close to your sticky and press jump, crouch, and secondary fire at the same time to go flying. This is the simplest way to sticky jump, opting for a medium distance and a lot of height. But what do you do when you don't want a lot of height and instead want speed? Well, you can perform what's known as a crouch det, or a crouched detonation jump. To do this, place a sticky on the floor. Now to perform a crouch det, walk over your sticky bomb, and at about the time you see your sticky start to leave your screen, crouch. Once fully crouched, press secondary fire to give yourself a lot of horizontal momentum. Make sure to keep holding your W key the entire time when walking forward towards your sticky bomb, and only let go once you have detonated your sticky, since after that you can just airstrafe. Note that your sticky jumps and crouch dets deal a lot of self-damage, usually around 80 or so. If you want to move quickly for a smaller health cost, try crouch jumping over and in front of your sticky bomb and detonating it a bit later, rather than instantly, to gain a bunch of horizontal velocity as well as a bit of vertical velocity. By combining these three techniques and using them in the appropriate time, you can traverse nearly any map like a pro. One more technique that all great Demoman players should know is the sticky pipe. This is a combo which can output a roughly 200 damage to anyone in your immediate vicinity in less than 1.5 seconds, which is about the time it takes for Heavy to rev up his minigun and start blasting you in the face. This combo is performed by first taking out your sticky bomb launcher and shooting a sticky bomb at your enemy's feet. As your sticky bomb is traveling through the air and landing on the ground, switch to your grenade launcher. By the time you have it holstered and ready to fire, your sticky bomb should be armed. Now, fire your grenade launcher at the enemy and press your secondary fire to detonate your sticky. Assuming you hit your pipe and your sticky is placed well,
Now that's a lot of damage!
if you are walking around and suddenly a heavy appears, perform a sticky pipe and then keep firing your pipe grenades at the heavy until he dies. The more experienced demos are jumping out of their seats and rushing to tell me in the comments to say that I missed sticky sinks, but I believe a different person deserves the credit for explaining how to use them. You will find Wild Rumpus's video about sticky sinks in the description below, so if you are ready to step up your game, I advise checking it out. That was a bit of a mouthful, but it gets easier from here on out, in theory of course. Your melee weapon is the simple bottle. It swings every 0.8 seconds and deals 65 base damage. It functions just as almost every other stock melee weapon in TF2. Pretty simple stuff. Although there do exist viable side grades for melee weapons, I won't be covering them in this section. Now, with the basics of demo done, it's about time I move on to actually playing the game rather than just babbling on about how you could do it. The first game mode in competitive I'll be covering is one of the two main competitive formats in which you will see a Demoman is sixes, or 6v6. Sixes is a format consisting of 6 players playing on either a 5CP or Koth map. The class limits are as follows: 2 scouts, 2 soldiers, 1 pyro, 1 Demoman, you, 1 heavy, 1 engineer, 1 medic, 1 sniper, and 1 spy, where the most consistently run set is 2 scouts, 2 soldiers, a Demoman, and a medic. 5CP maps are run on a win limit of 5, where you play until one team either wins 5 rounds or the time runs out, in which case the team with the most rounds wins. The most commonly played 5CP maps are Process, Sunshine, Metalworks, Snakewater, with other maps like Sultry, Gullywash, Granary, or Reckoner sometimes making an appearance as well. There's so many maps, I can barely process all of this information. When it comes to playing 5CP as a demo, by far the most important factor is your positioning on the map. You want to be standing preferably on high ground and a good distance away from any choke points you see, while still being able to maintain a good vision on them. A perfect example of good versus bad positioning would be Process Second. Lots of newer demos choose to play on grass, which is this area right here, since it's close to the choke point and it allows you to do a lot of spam and damage on the enemy combo, who will usually be playing on the other side of the choke. However, this is probably by far the worst place you could actually stand on the entirety of Process Second, right behind quite literally feeding into the enemy choke. First of all, by standing on grass, you are directly exposing yourself to sewers, as well as to the choke in front of you. Secondly, you are on constant low ground relative to the both choke and sewers, meaning you have very limited vision and soldiers can easily hit splash damage on you. By playing in choke, you are essentially announcing to the entire enemy team that you are a free kill. By contrast, should you play on point or on concrete, you are always on high ground relative to the enemy team, since in order to push into you, they need to go through the entirety of grass first, which we just found out was a terrible place to be. Additionally, you are close to both a health and ammo pack in case you need it, and you have plenty of time to quickly and easily escape to your last point in case things go south. Another crucial thing you need to keep in mind is your ammo, especially when it comes to sixes, where you don't always have a dispenser around, and your ammo packs can just be stolen from right in front of you. That aside, it's really easy to just go unloading your entire clip into a choke point as effective spam, but that's not really your job as Demo. Your pocket soldiers should be firing rockets into choke points to stop people from easily walking through. If you don't have your weapons reloaded, you can often just get caught out with your pants down, and when the enemy decides to push into you, smart players often count the ammo of enemy Demoman to know when to push. Ideally, when holding, you should have some traps placed, around 4 to 8 stickies, on any doors, chokes, or really anything. Alternatively, you can forego having traps at all and just spam with your stickies into the choke point. If you do decide to do that, my suggestion is to never unload more than half of your clip at a time when spamming, whether that be pipes or stickies. Having enough ammo to fight at any point in time is invaluable, since being ubered when pushing into the enemy team only to realize you have nothing loaded is probably the biggest bait you could do. Moving on to the other game type, King of the Hill can be a whole different story. Rather than shuffling around an entire map for 30 minutes, you're often shuffling around a single point for 30 minutes. This fact alone is the reason why off-classes like Sniper or even Pyro sometimes are much more prevalent long time on Koth maps. Your role in King of the Hill is to most of all deny captures. You are equipped with single-handedly the best capture point defense weapon in the entire game, the Sticky Bomb Launcher, and you should use it as such. A lot of the time, enemy scouts are going to be trying to edge the cap, which essentially means to repeatedly make capture time on the point to eventually try to capture it without fully committing. You are equipped with a weapon that can unload hundreds of damage whenever and wherever you so desire, and you should use your immense power to deny enemy players from edging the point. You have some of the best spam tools in the game, and you should use them to deal as much damage as you possibly can. Since your role in locking down doorways and pathways is invaluable, and when a Demoman is dead on either team, it's safe to expect a counterpush. With you sorted though, it's time to discuss your role in your team, since you are playing with 5 other people after all, and it is very, and I do mean very important to note that you are the sole damage dealer in sixes. Your stickies and pipes output such a tremendous amount of damage, and because you are the sole damage dealer, if you are dead, that means the enemy team is usually alive, which is not good. Another key role you will fulfill is the task of locking down choke points and objectives with sticky traps and spam. Because Demoman can detonate his stickies whenever he likes, this can make him the perfect anti-objective defense system. As I mentioned previously, your weapons deal massive damage not just to your enemies, but often also yourself, which, among other reasons, often makes you the primary healing target. If you look at the logs of almost any sixes match, you can check the amount that each medic healed each player, and Demoman consistently ranks number 1 on that list. Additionally, because of your importance in the game, you become the key victim of focus fire from your enemies, as well as the key element in Uber pushes. Overall, your role is mostly a balance of dealing damage and staying alive, since you are the second most valuable player on your team behind your medic. This means that feeding for the funnies is rarely a viable strategy unless you coordinate with your team. But what if you don't want to run around a huge map for 30 minutes? Maybe you prefer the more casual-centric game modes like Payload or Attack Defend. Lucky for you, that's where the second primary competitive game mode comes in. The second main competitive format is 9v9, or more commonly what is referred to as Highlander. Highlander consists of each class per team, and is often played on Payload or Koth maps. In Highlander, your positioning matters significantly less than in Sixes. However, that doesn't mean you can go around peeking sniper sight lines without a care in the world. All it means is that you should focus more on other aspects of your gameplay rather than your positioning, like ammo management and game sense. Namely, with the existence of every class, you need to keep track of a few more things than in Sixes, since Sniper is now always a looming threat. Because of the existence of more players, your damage output has now significantly increased and your life is all the more valuable. Previously, in Sixes you should be aiming for somewhere between 250 to 350 damage per minute, or DPM for short. In Highlander, however, you want to be hitting almost double that, somewhere between 550 and 650 DPM. Most pushes in Highlander revolve around the other team having a player or Uber advantage, and most significant player advantages are when either the Demoman, Medic, or Sniper are dead, as they play the most influential roles in the entire game. Just like in Sixes though, you are the sole and primary beam target as well as the sole and primary damage dealer. You should always be present in Uber pushes as well as team fights. Although it is important to cover a few key differences in Highlander compared to Sixes, since Highlander features the asymmetric game mode known as Payload, or Attack Defend in the case of Steel, which feature an attacking side as well as a defending side, where the goal is to capture all of the points as fast as you possibly can, with the team who captured the most points fastest being the winner. On Payload, your main role on offense is to destroy enemy buildings, kill players who are causing you trouble, and spam choke points to prevent those pesky buggers on the enemy team from getting close to you and your friends in the first place. Unlike in Sixes, you don't want to be putting your face directly in the line of fire of the enemy team, since your medic has more than 8 other teammates to worry about instead of only 5. Rather, you want to be playing far enough away from the danger so that you are able to run away if things go south, but close enough to still be able to output relatively good damage onto the enemy team. Payload defense, on the other hand, is a bit different. Instead of creating opportunities to push into the enemy team, your main focus will be denying the enemy team the privilege of making those opportunities to push into your team. This can be accomplished by just spamming at the enemy combo whenever you can or want to. As long as you are putting out damage, the enemy team won't feel safe pushing into you, which is what you want to do. Run down the clock. Traps here are going to be your best friend on defense, since a well-placed sticky trap can absolutely tear the enemy team in half with over 1,000 damage in some cases, being unloaded onto the entire enemy combo within a fraction of a second. Quick switching between grenades and stickies can be especially useful when fighting large groups of enemies, such as when pushing in with an Uber. However, if you feel that you need to save your grenades for more immediate threats, using regular sticky spam is also a valid solution. Moving on, I will briefly cover King of the Hill, or Koth for short, since it isn't very interesting in my opinion and I don't feel like repeating myself from the Sixes section. Koth has a few important things you need to keep in mind. The main difference between Sixes and Highlander Koth is the existence of every class. This means that engineers exist. Since most engineers on Koth maps will be running mini-sentries, your pipes and stickies are the perfect tool for destroying them. Because of how oppressive sentry guns are to close-range classes like Scout, Pyro, Engineer, who don't have effective ways of dealing with them at medium ranges, you need to destroy them as soon as you see them built. Other than that, your priorities don't change too much from Payload or even Sixes Koth for that matter. Shoot spam at the enemy combo, deal as much damage as possible, and don't die. I admit this is certainly easier said than done, but if your team knows what it's doing, and you know what you're doing, which you hopefully should be by the end of this video, you should be fine. Now that you know the basics of competitive gameplay, it's time to move on to team play, and more specifically, Maincalling. Since you are by far one of the most important people on your team, this role is usually delegated to you, but if you don't feel comfortable with it, you can always make someone else do it. In simplest terms, Maincalling is the practice of organizing strategy for your team. Now, by Maincalling, I don't mean telling each individual class where they need to stand and what to do, because I assume your team is competent enough to know what they are responsible for. For instance, your engineer shouldn't need his main caller to tell him to build a dispenser in general, but the main caller could ask your engineer to move the dispenser to a specific location. This is also why there exist what's known as default spots, which are locations where teams play by default unless communicated otherwise by the main caller. In essence, as a main caller, you organize team fights and general strategy, rather than specific roles for each player. You call when to use Uber charges, when a soldier should bomb in, when and who does the sack wave, timing your spy to go in during pushes, etc. Now, in order to be a good main caller, you need to keep track of 6 crucial things, and you can basically put all of these under the umbrella term of game sense. Primarily, you need to have a good sense of the map, or what's known as positional awareness, which effectively means you need to know where your teammates are and where the enemy team is at any given moment. You are usually at the front line dueling the enemy combo head-on, so you, except for maybe a spy, usually have the most information about the enemy team at any given point. Additionally, you are usually in a position where you can see all of your teammates at any given time, meaning you can call to rotate to a specific side or retreat from the fight entirely depending on the position of both your and the enemy team. This leads me to the second point, which is team awareness. You need to be aware of who on your and the enemy team is alive at any given point, which you can do by checking the match HUD or the scoreboard. This effectively allows you to push at a specific time depending on what kind of player advantages you have. For instance, if the enemy sniper is dead, then pushing into sniper sightlines would be a good idea since there isn't a sniper watching them. However, the same applies to your team. If you see that you don't have a lot of players alive at the moment, and the enemy team is very much still alive, your best bet would be to retreat and regroup with your players when they respawn. Another important factor is health awareness, which is how healthy your and the enemy team is. This is something you can usually delegate to your team's medic, for instance, since it takes a bit of weight off your shoulders, but it relies on your team being able to effectively call their damage and their targets. For instance, a call like 200 on their demo would mean the enemy combo is relatively weak, since the enemy demo would have at most 60 health left.
Wow!
This allows you to make the strategic decision to push in when you know you have a health advantage, which could turn the tide in your favor. The three previous points mostly referred to teams in the game rather than individual players, which is where by far the most important factor comes in: Uber difference, aka Uber awareness. The entire game revolves around the medic's Uber charge, which makes him by far the most important class in the entire game. If you can't deal damage to someone, and they can deal damage to you, then you have a big problem on your hands. This is exactly why the game focuses on differences in Ubers. Uber advantage, sometimes referred to as simply AD, means that your medic has more Uber charge than the enemy medic, allowing you to make the strategic decision to push in with an Uber when the enemy team doesn't have one yet. Ubers are usually tracked by your team's medic, so asking them, for instance, what's the AD, can help them estimate how much of an advantage you have on the enemy and how long you have to use it. It takes roughly 40 to 60 seconds to charge one Uber from 0 to 100, meaning that each 10% of Uber difference roughly translates to 5 seconds of charge time. If you know that you have 40 AD, that means you have an Uber advantage of 40% over the enemy medic, or about a 20-second window until the enemy team gets their Uber. In this exact window is when you should be pushing into the enemy team to try and kill the enemy medic, or at least do as much damage as possible. The same follows for Uber disadvantages, sometimes referred to simply as disad, where the enemy medic has more Uber charge than your medic. These Uber differences affect where, and more importantly how, you decide to play at any given point. On a large Uber disad, you should be playing more passively, ready to leave if the enemy team starts applying too much pressure. Staying alive on Uber disad is by far the most important thing you should do, with the only exception being coordinated sacrifice waves, where you intentionally run into the enemy team expecting to die, but trying to at least kill one or more people, with that usually being the enemy medic or Demoman. Next is another important factor, that being objective awareness. Since most game modes are played to run down the clock, you need to be aware of how much time you have to coordinate your next push into the enemy team. Just like with players, you can see this at the top of your match HUD. Remember that each Uber takes between 40 to 60 seconds to charge, meaning that for each minute you have left, that's the maximum amount of Uber pushes that you can coordinate. The last crucial factor to take into account is ammo awareness, or in other words, how much ammo you and the enemy demo have left. Just like with Ubers, tracking this can be delegated to another player like your medic. I explained why it's important to have at least some ammo loaded at any given time, but you can only get so much reserve ammo until you need to go back and resupply. These resupply windows are for you to exploit. I see that a lot of new players stand around health sources and not take any risks, which leads them to being overrun by more aggressive playstyles. The simplest solution sometimes is just to not fear, as dumb as that may sound. Your W key exists for a reason, and when you know you can have even the slightest advantage, you need to exploit it while you still can. While main calling as Demoman is very important, it's also important to understand the possible loadouts you can use to create the biggest impact. Starting off with 6s, the most common primary choices are either the stock grenade launcher or the iron bomber. Personally, I prefer the iron bomber since its rollers are more consistent and allow for easier spamming onto objectives, because the rollers behave like sticky spam that just does less damage. Stock, however, allows you to snipe damage on players or buildings from really long ranges, and the increased explosion radius can help sometimes when shooting at large, more dense groups of players. Although both stock and the iron bomber have its upsides and downsides, it's largely up to personal preference. For your secondary slot, I can only recommend using stickies, since they are the by far strongest weapon in TF2 and Demoman's effective primary weapon. For your melee weapon, I highly recommend using the half Zatoichi. The health on kill buff rarely comes into play, but having it is nice, and the longer melee range can also come in handy sometimes. The main reason for equipping the katana, though, surprisingly, is its self-damage debuff, since it allows you to more quickly build ubercharge with your medic if no scouts are alive, since it deals a respectable amount of self-damage without chewing through your ammo supply. I do sometimes see the stock bottle or reskins used, however both I and lots of other people agree that katana is just the better way to go. In Highlander, however, you have a few more options. For your primary slot, you of course have the decade-old debate of the Iron Bomber versus stock, however another viable side grade I sometimes see used is the loose cannon. Although it is very situational, it can sometimes come in handy due to its incredibly high knockback stat, allowing you to physically shove people off the objective. Since it specializes at mid-range, about the same range as the sticky bomb launcher does, for effective spam you will need to watch out for anyone trying to rush you down. Additionally, its fuse time is significantly shorter than both stock and the iron bomber, so you really can't spam it from longer ranges like you can with stock pipe grenades. For your secondary slot, you have the option of using either the sticky bomb launcher or the quickie bomb launcher. Stock is obviously more consistent in the long term, however the quickie bomb launcher is used mostly in crit streak pushes due to its incredibly long range and relatively high damage output. Since the damage ramps up based on charge, it allows you to deal hundreds of crit damage with the crit streak from across the entire map in less than 2 seconds, which would usually take the sticky bomb launcher at least 5 seconds to do the same. Additionally, the ability to destroy enemy sticky bombs can come in handy occasionally when clearing doorways or objectives. For your melee slot, you can either use the katana or the bottle. In Highlander, building Uber with your medic doesn't really matter that much since he has so many people he can heal and you are almost always taking damage anyway. This means that running stock just for the faster holster and draw speed can come in very handy when dealing with spies, since sometimes you can't really afford to take the pipe self-damage. There isn't really much else to be said that I haven't said already, so if there was one thing that you need to take away from this video, that would be this. Overall, Demoman is an incredibly powerful damage dealer. His ability to dish out tens of thousands of damage per game is invaluable, and despite the amount of things you need to keep track of, he is undoubtedly one of the most influential classes in the game, and certainly helpful to learn. Although Demoman can seem very hard at the beginning, especially with all the things you need to keep track of in order to play him effectively, with sufficient time and practice he becomes much easier to play. Once you understand all the intricacies in his playstyle, his powerful and important role in the game, as well as all the niche quirks and nuances in his gameplay, you truly reach a point where you can effortlessly dish out damage left and right. Even though this might seem daunting at first, becoming a good competitive Demoman turns from a chaotic mess into what is effectively an art form. Thanks for watching. This has been something I've been making for a very long time, and it's my first actually normal video. I've been balancing schoolwork and my personal life for the last few months to try to get this video done, and if you've reached this far, I'd like to thank you so much for the support. I have more videos coming soon, so make sure to like and subscribe, and stay tuned for the next upload sometime this year.